Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I want to introduce my panel this morning. Very distinguished folks up here with me. Starting for the furthest over there, that is Vicki Patton. She's the channel chief at Rackspace. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you.
Next to her, we have Jeff Betancourt from INAP, who's director of the engineering folks there. And then we have Wellington Lordello, who is from Equinix. Good to see you again this year, Wellington. He's the marketing manager there. And then head of sales for all of Americas, we have Colin McLean here at the very end for DRT. So just a couple of quick definitions, not to insult anyone, but just we're going to be talking about hybrid cloud and also multi-cloud. So I just wanted to give you a high-level definition of those. A hybrid cloud, by definition, I'll just give you the cliff notes. You guys don't have to read that. For example, if your customer has a big footprint in digital, for example, and that is their private compute cloud, and they wanted to connect to AWS, which is a public cloud, they need a network fabric or a cross-connect between them. The fact that those two clouds are disparate makes it a hybrid cloud, and the fact that they're interconnected with a fabric or a direct connect in that case makes it a hybrid cloud. Doesn't matter how many more clouds you add to that, it's still a hybrid cloud. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The multi-cloud is more of a homogeneous type of cloud scenario where, for example, a customer, let's say he wants to run some workloads, i.e. applications, within the cloud, and he decides to go with Amazon on the West Coast, so AWS on the West Coast, and he decides to go with Azure on the East Coast, right? That is a multi-cloud, two clouds of the same type. Make sense? Awesome. Okay. So this is a statement from our friends at CoreSite. It was a nice paper that they recently did, so I wanted to include it in here. And it basically says, in the last 2 years, there was a mass adoption of hybrid cloud architectures, with co-location resurging as a strong infrastructure component of the hybrid cloud. Really, what they're saying is that co-location was front and center of the entire hybrid cloud. So based on that, we're going to get into some questions for our panel here. And the first question will be for Lordello at Equinix. Lordello, what do you see as some of the drivers of the resurgence of co-location services?
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here again this year. So every year we launch what we call the Global Interconnection Index, which is free for downloading our website, Equinix.com. So that particular study that we predict the growth of the interconnection, as Mel has nicely introduced the concept of interconnection. You connect your systems, your gears directly to other peers, other service providers. And the main drivers to drive co-location is especially the need for interconnection. And there's this need for interconnection where we see all industries happening, demanding low latency, demanding security, demanding data being adjacent to the cloud service providers, to their technical service providers, technological service providers, network service providers. And the need for that demands a lot. There's a driver for that co-location piece. Not just that, but also reducing the amount of real estate as well, like companies not figuring out that it's not my business to operate a data center, so I need to outsource that co-location to true specialists on that. So they realize that not just migrating the workloads to a data center to reduce the real estate cost, but also has this interconnection power to interconnect with other providers too.
Awesome, thank you for that. And that's a great point there as well. In terms of Wellington, you mentioned just the on-prem to co-location migration that we saw since COVID. It's been really surging out there. So next question is going to be for Colin. And Colin, as the head of sales, you speak to a lot of CIOs. If a CIO asked you, what are the benefits of deploying a hybrid cloud, what should our strategists say?
Well, first, thanks for allowing me to be on stage with you guys. It's a pleasure to be out in front. Digital Realty has gone through quite the transformation as an organization. So, I think for the longest time, we were known more from a wholesale perspective, actually supporting a lot of the clouds that we're talking about here. A lot of the infrastructure rides within our four walls. And so we've gone on through the journey now to really try to capture the enterprise because we feel like there's a major transformation going on in the marketplace. And so when we have conversations with CIOs, the first thing we start with is what exactly are you trying to accomplish? So what's the specificity of the workload you're looking to solve for? Because oftentimes people come with answers to questions that they don't necessarily have a fully built out strategy to support. So for instance, in our portfolio, we'll have a particular building that is an interconnection hub. It happens to be actually the most densely connected building in Chicago or Dallas or Atlanta. And a lot of times folks will come with the answer, I need to be at 350 Cermak, without actually understanding what the use case is that would justify that latency requirement or requirements to access the cloud. Because oftentimes we find in enterprises is they have an assumption on latency orientation to their workload that may or may not be sound. So one thing that I would strongly encourage from a strategy perspective is engage the folks up here on stage, and in particular the solution architecture community, to really work through what you're trying to accomplish in various parts of the globe, because there could be different answers to the equation. At the same time, you also need to understand the trade-offs of cloud. So I'll be the first to tell you there's a lot of great things about cloud. If you look at our top 20 list, there's a bunch of clouds up there, but there's also some trade-offs. Namely, the two that jump to the top of the list are performance and cost. So really know what you're getting into when you're talking to a CIO, get the technical expertise and the depth there so you can have a holistic conversation, because otherwise you're maybe answering questions with kind of false pretense or suppositions as it relates to the ultimate outcomes for your clients.
Thanks, Colin. Great response. I agree with you. Certainly when you get the CIO, make sure you have him open up and ask him, like, what are some of the strategic initiatives that he's running as it relates to cloud. So yeah, very good, very good. The next one here is for Rackspace. So Vicki, do you see customers moving workloads off of public cloud and into hybrid environments? And if so, which ones are they?
Good question. Hi, everybody. Good to be here. It's my first time to Ojai, and I guess maybe my last, right? So anyway, real happy to be here with the Bridgepoint folks, which we have been gaining huge momentum with many of you, so thank you for that. The question about moving, so a lot of your customers have made the choice to jump to public cloud. You can go into AWS. It's like buying from a catalog, swipe your credit card, buy what you want. You have maybe people throughout the organization. You've heard the term IT sprawl. That means people throughout the organization that are, swiping cards, putting in account codes, and buying all of this AWS or Google or Azure. And spend has gotten out of control. There's a lot of challenges that we'll talk a little bit more about that your customers who are in the cloud are facing already. So they're starting to reevaluate, did I do the right thing? What are the use cases? Like both these guys, it's really about where should those workloads be running? What are they trying to accomplish from a business point of view? And where should those be? And again, the costs have really spiraled out of control because nobody's watching it. There's no governance programs in places in a lot of cases. So they are looking to move back into a private cloud environment. And the private clouds can be in their own data center, they can be in a co-location facility, or they can be in a Rackspace facility or with many of your other suppliers. So it's really about digging into what they're trying to accomplish from a business point of view. We heard yesterday talked about, I think Sanjay from Microsoft is the one that said 2 years worth of digital transformation happened in 2 months. That means people were making crazy fast decisions, right? And now they're all looking at it going, what did we do? How do we fix this? Let's take another look at it. And there is the case of moving back to private cloud. So, that's what we do is we come in and we help the customer really understand where they're at right now, what they've done in the past couple of years, and what's the best based upon what their business requirements are. So we are seeing a lot of that. You hear the term repatriation. That's, bringing it from private or from public cloud back to private cloud. We're seeing a lot of that, actually.
Thank you, Vicki. Jeff, question for you. Obviously, we all know about the supply chain issues going on, right? And sometimes the colo folks can get footprints ready in 60 days, sometimes faster. but the hardware is not going to get there for 6 months. So how can INAP help folks with their applications in light of that scenario?
Yeah, that's an absolutely real problem today. And again, thank you guys for having us, all of us. It's great to be up here and listen to our peers and what they have to say. It's a good discussion, so thank you guys for that. Back to the topic at hand. Yeah, I've got customers who are waiting 9 months for switches, right? So this is a real problem today. What we're looking for, and this has been said before, but what applications are they going to be deploying? Can we move those to the cloud, right? That's fine. It's not our revenue stream, but we're helping our customers, right? We're putting our consultant hats on and trusted advisor hats on and helping them. So can we move those to the cloud? Or, more to our liking, can we do bare metal solution, right? Bare metal, we've got tons of existing inventory that we can spin up in a week, 2 weeks, whatever you need, and then we can connect back to their co-location, right? So depending upon what those workloads are, maybe we build them their own private cloud that they can then spin up these workloads in, right? So there's a couple of different ways we can skin the cat, so to speak. It just depends, again, on what their long-term plans are. Is this a temporary stopgap until their hardware comes in, because that plays into it, or is this going to be maybe the future of where they're going to go to, right? Back to that cloud repatriation, it tends to have a negative connotation towards public clouds, right? Maybe they're inferior, what have you. And really, I think it's the other way around. I think it actually bodes to the flexibility of your workloads. If you're able to move them in and out of clouds, or into bare metal or colo when the equipment arrives, that actually just speaks to the versatility and actually the growth of the industry itself. So, if you hear somebody take it in a negative connotation, I would counter that point. A little off topic, but it was important. I like that term. So,
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. IDC sees a hybrid cloud approach as an inevitability for business, with the different modes of adoption to be determined by IT decision makers based on use case. We're already talking about use case. We're going to continue that. The next series of questions here. How does hybrid cloud impact the basic fundamentals, tasks of IT, like data protection? That's for you as well, Jeff.
So the idea is, automation, right? We need to make this easier. Set it, forget it, get notified if something goes wrong, right? Maybe we check up on it, daily. But the fundamental idea that we can automate tasks, such as data protection, right? Backup services, however you want to include that, offsite replication. The theory that this hybrid cloud and its ability to make sure that it's done without thought and with scalability, right? So that's typically the fundamental that I look at when we're talking about automation and backup with the hybrid cloud.
Awesome. Next question is going to be, I'm going to open it up to both Colin as well as Wellington here. And we've seen COVID accelerate the move away from on-premise to hybrid, utilizing new methods like SaaS, public and private cloud, as well as co-location, as we know, is resurging, adding complexity and obviously needing integration. How are you guys interconnecting all of these disparate networks? We'll start with Colin.
Yeah, surely is a complicated world we're living in. And, I think taking a perspective from a platform point of view about what offerings your partners can offer and what they do best is one of our core value propositions. So Digital Realty heritage is in, building purpose-built data centers and enabling partners to add layers of successful orientation on top of it. So what we viewed as core to our competency is be really, really good at what you do well, which is we're really good about building data centers globally and enabling partners and customers to enable their applications in our four walls. We've also moved more and more towards a platform view that requires a service fabric of sorts or interconnection strategy whereby we can effectively connect both to data centers, to clouds, and frankly, even to competitors. So the way that we've started to address this modality is we've launched Service Fabric, and we continued with that with this notion of having an open framework versus having a more closed-off view of the world. Because our perspective is, given the complexity you just mentioned, you need as many open doors as possible to make sure your partners can fit into that ecosystem. So we have, as of 3 or 4 months ago, we launched the Service Fabric to start the journey that's going to eventually lead us to be able to support a platform orientation to a marketplace, which really says, hey, we're good at the data center piece. If you're good at bare metal or you're good at SaaS or PaaS or whatever that catch, you can layer on top of this fabric to enable that. So our perspective, again, just orientated to self, is interconnection is huge. It will always be a big part of that. Let's do what you do well, which is enable that to be successful, and let's create an open framework to make collectively the client successful in what they're doing.
At Equinix, we believe that enterprises are right now facing the most challenging situations on their IT backlog, or trying to complete every project that they have. And we have the privilege to sit on the front row seat and see digital leaders that they thrived, and they were able to scale when it's needed, especially towards, it doesn't really matter if it's on-prem, if it's at co-location, or on cloud, or at the cloud. As long as my workload can migrate easily and seamlessly between all of those environments, that's perfect. And we learned that all those digital leaders, they found that the network was the foundation of digital transformation. At the point that they found out that the network were the foundation of digital transformation, we found out that the digital infrastructure right now, the concept can be broken into 3 main components. And you guys can forget everything I'm gonna say today, but cannot forget this point. This digital infrastructure comprises in a digital core, migrating critical workloads and placing it adjacent to public clouds they are currently utilizing to comply with the hybrid workforce, with the hybrid workloads, I mean. Digital core, digital ecosystems integrating through a digital ecosystems, and interacting at digital edge, creating the bridge between the users and the systems all over the world with low latency. And the point is that when we realize that the digital infrastructure with those 3 components, that we are seeing digital leaders harnessing this model, that can be applied to any enterprise on any industry, that it's like a very simple recipe that they can embrace on their digital strategy and go on. So you don't have to be experts on that. We have our GSAs, our Global Solutions Architects, to work with you all to assess where the best workload placement would be, and help your customers, your end customers, to really make the full potential of them on the digital economy. So see as Equinix as we are democratizing the access to digital economy.
Well, those are 2 great answers. I know you guys have hundreds of data centers, so you have to figure out how to interconnect and all that. Once we're interconnected, though, with all of these clouds at layer 2, let's take it up a couple layers. And Vicky, I guess the one thing I see coming on the horizon is multi-cloud orchestration, right? Or the ability to orchestrate a workload from this cloud to that cloud. What tools, and I guess how can Rackspace help with the orchestration level of the workloads and application flows?
All right, Mel, that's a big technical word now. I told you not to do that. No, I'm just kidding. I told him I'm up here because I've been in IT sales for several decades, and I've never been technical. I always connect myself to great systems engineers. No, orchestration is making everything work together, right? And the thing Rackspace does is we help companies maximize the use of their investments and fix those problems they've made over the last few years, right? So Google, AWS, and Microsoft, Azure, have all grown over 40%. They're all on huge growth trajectories. And each of them come out with thousands of new features each year. That just makes it more complicated. But people like using those features because those features help them get things done more quickly. You hear cloud is not, it's a marketing term, but it's about innovation. It's allowing customers to grab things quickly, do very quick development, and get a product to market quickly using those platforms. So there might be something they really like in Google. There might be something else they really want to do in AWS. And there's stuff they're doing still on their applications that are maybe sitting in a VMware environment. So VMware still owns over 75% of the virtualization market. So there's a lot of different ways to help them work together. You have to connect them. That's a piece of it. But then How do we secure all that in a consistent way? Rackspace helps with that. We do it through professional services, through managed services. The other big thing is putting applications into containers. So my favorite word in all of technology is Kubernetes. Have you guys heard of Kubernetes? That's a container. Basically, in the most simplest terms, you're taking your applications. Jeff's going to punch me after this. You take your applications, you put them in a box, and then you can move that box around. So maybe it starts in AWS, and then, oops, I want to go move it to Google because I'm a retailer, and AWS, Amazon is getting in my business, so I want to move it over here, right? So containerization, Kubernetes, Dockers, that's a really big thing going on right now that customers are trying to get done. So those are all areas we can help. We come in, we evaluate what they have, figure out what they're trying to do, and then make recommendations to help them make that transformation and do the migration also, and help them all work together. That's the key, using like a fabric to put them together.
Awesome. You did pretty good, Vicki. That's awesome. Containers, Kubernetes, I love it. We're going to change it up just a little bit, and I'm going to add in just some topics that are topical right now in your industry, and what I see on the horizon, right? So we have inflationary pressures, we have recessionary pressures, we have a global energy crisis as far as cost of energy goes, cost per kW as it relates to this industry. Obviously, in Europe, it's worse because Russia has shut off the energy to flow to Europe, and those are as much as $1 a kilowatt, which is about 5x what it was 6 months ago. So some major, major issues going on. Data center supplies are low because the hyperscalers bought most of your inventory. So we've got that issue, right? So I guess where is this industry going with all of these complex issues happening right now in the next, not 5 to 10 years, Kinka, 5 to 10 months? So my question, I'm opening it up, whoever wants to jump on that.
Sure, I can jump on that one. I mean, we talk about the complexity of the migration of workload. I mean, talk about the complexity of the current financial climate is off the charts, right? I mean, you talked about the yin and yang of having a interest rate oriented environment that also has supply chain limitations with no end in sight. And you couple that with the amount of capacity that's been consumed across domestically and internationally. So we know, because I happen to manage a few of the accounts for a period of time, we know over the last, say, year, there's been over 600 megawatts of consumption coming out of 4 clients. 4 clients. And what that's done is the order of magnitude in terms of managing the inflationary environment with interest rates and now limited capacity makes our jobs as strategists and providers all that more complicated. So one of the things that I'd really advise when I talk to CIOs, et cetera, is make sure when you're partnering with somebody that you know who you are getting in bed with. Because at the end of the day on this is a complicated world, and you have to know at the end of that 3-year term or 5-year term that you have somebody that you can trust. Because at the end of the day on this, there's a lot of challenges that we as operators have to work through on the whole. So from a digital perspective, one of the things I tell my team, and Joe Sachs is in the back, so he's heard this quite a bit, is the storm is coming or it's already here. And so we as an organization, at least from a digital perspective, feel like that we've built a foundation that's going to enable us to weather our way through that. And I'm not sure that's going to be the case, with all operators or frankly with all partners. So I think one of the jobs that you guys have as strategists is to make sure that you've appropriately vetted the people that you're working with, ultimately to make sure your client's getting served well.
Yeah, those are great points. And just to add to that, the first thing companies do when they figure out that they're in a recession is they're going to look for operational efficiencies, right? They're going to downsize sprawl, which is terrible term, but it absolutely is accurate, right? So they're going to look to see how do we make this, $750,000 a month AWS bill shrink, right? And that's actually an opportunity for you guys. You can get in there, you can pitch bare metal, where there's a predictable spend. They can, start to achieve some of those operational efficiencies, pretty quickly, actually. So just because it's recession doesn't necessarily mean that the opportunity isn't there. You just have to look for it.
Yeah, there's a ton of opportunity to help your customers optimize what they have already. So whether it's, even whether it's in-house or whether it's in the cloud. So that's one of the services we provide is come in, either on a professional services basis or help them manage to it, is put that governance program in place to help them understand where their spend is. And even just like AWS, just get it under control. Turn the stuff off you're not using. Turn it off on the weekends if you're not using it. But they don't oftentimes know what to look for, right? So we can come in and provide the tools to help them do that. So that's an immediate way to help them save cost. The other area is in talent. Companies, if they're looking at layoffs, or your customers that are hiring now, they're looking, I mean, go on their career sites before you go in and meet with them and see how many cloud architects they're hiring, how many security engineers they're hiring. They're having a tough time. And Rackspace has a model called Elastic Engineering, which is a big cost saver for them, but it helps them get stuff done quickly because they get access to a pod of engineers that are experts in that technology that helps them get stuff done quickly. So whether it's optimizing, whether it's getting some new development done, whether it's setting up configuring your security environment correctly, that will help them save costs and still get things done because they can't stop doing business, right? So ask the questions around, and that's a business conversation. How are your customers doing around talent and skill sets? Do they have the skills in-house to get done what they need to get done to, meet those business requirements, the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve?
And at Equinix, we believe that digital is and will continue to be the answer for all the major crises and all the magic trying to find new revenue streams across our business and our industries. And we also believe that this is also an opportunity to really all companies and all of here in stage to really see in a sustainable way. And sustainability is such a great topic today as where we can forecast and predict that there's a crisis going on, and of course, and we cannot operate in the same model that we used to operate before. We have to innovate. And in order to innovate and give our customers the ability that they can claim to be green, efficient, we are also committed with that with our customers and help your customers to succeed in that way as well. Thinking green, thinking on the future in a more sustainable way, and also to prevent some unforecasted moments like we are living today.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was great. I appreciate that. Now we're going to our friends at Gartner. Gartner projects that by 2025, 85% of infrastructure strategies will integrate on-prem, colo, cloud edge, all the stuff we're talking about versus 20%. So the hybrid cloud really has now dominated over that 5-year period. So with that, some questions. We'll start with a question for Vicki. What are the top 3 challenges that companies already in the public cloud are experiencing?
All right, we've talked about several of these already. So if you look at Gartner, if you read the Flexera State of the Cloud report, that's my favorite because it has a lot of pretty pictures. But the 3 top ones for customers that are in the cloud already, first is cybersecurity, right? They want to secure those environments, and it gets more complicated the more platforms you use. Plus, you have SaaS, like if you're using Salesforce or some of these other things. So cybersecurity is number 1. The second one is the talent gap that I just talked about. And the third one is, I'm blanking out.
No worries. We will
Well,
move
I
on.
sent you the chart.
You did. I have the chart. I'll share it.
I will think of it in a minute. Hold on. It's cybersecurity. It's the cost spend. I knew it was something I talked about already. So it's getting those under control, the cost under control, and putting a governance program in place. Those are all 3 business discussions you can be asking your customers about, especially up at the VP and above levels, because they're the ones that are having to deal with it. If you go in and you have a conversation with the CFO, they're going to talk about all of those things as well.
Awesome. Thank you. This one's for Wellington. Do you think the public cloud offerings have peaked, which is why companies are beginning to migrate services to other environments?
I don't think so. I think cloud is still evolving in terms of delivering more and more products and solutions, innovating on their end. I think right now, the enterprises are realizing that cloud is not the messiah that would solve all the problems that we have. Like plug and play, I'm going to swipe my credit card and I'm going to solve all my problems. So now they're realizing more and more that cloud is such a great model to operate with the scalability, flexibility, and elasticity. But they are also demanding for all service providers right now to operate colocation in the very same model. And that's why we have to innovate and offer bare metal services that we prefer to call it as colocation as a service, because you can have the same workloads. You don't need to modify your application as you have to do on the cloud, and you can operate in a bare metal solution. We also have network edge, which is exactly virtual routers, virtual switches, or firewalls that your customers can deploy anywhere in the world as a service model as well. So we've seen that no, the clouds are not peaked have not peaked, but we are seeing that enterprises are realizing more and more they're getting mature enough to realize where my workload should be placed.
Thank you. And I think the 30-40% growth year over year shows they haven't peaked as well. So, in terms of, let's see, this one's for INAP. What are some of the challenges customers face when wanting to orchestrate a multi-cloud strategy for their applications to achieve business continuity as the business outcome?
So pretty simple. There's three things I see that are glaring. One is talent. You have to have the in-house talent to manage these multi-clouds. So am I AWS certified, am I Azure certified, GCP, whatever. As Vicki alluded to earlier, it's not easy to find this type of talent, right? The next thing would be security. Securing your environment across multi does take quite a bit. It's quite complex. Single sign-on, all this stuff, right? And the last thing would be cost. One cloud costs a lot. Having multiple clouds just costs that much more, right? So those are the three that I would look to address. If they are actually considering a multi-cloud strategy, make sure that they have considered those three things.
Awesome. And one thing I just wanted to mention to everyone, we've been hearing private cloud, we've been hearing bare metal. Really, both of those are private clouds. The only difference between the two is that bare metal is without the OS, the operating system, meaning the customer will upload as an operating system, and then he'll upload applications on top of that. Where a fully hosted private cloud includes the VMware layer on top of it, so it's got the operating system, and the customer just uploads his applications. Just so you guys get familiar with that term.
Hey, Mel, I was just going to add, because you mentioned business continuity. So I spent a lot of years in business continuity, and no matter what you are doing with your customers, any kind of project, always ask them, how is this impacting your business continuity plan, right? Because anytime they make changes, something's got to change in their business continuity plan. And secondly is cybersecurity, same thing. Anytime they're making changes, how does this impact your security posture? So when you're talking about business continuity, it gets more complicated, but there's solutions for all the different, AWS has solutions, Google, everybody has solutions within their own platform, but it might make sense to back up your private cloud to Azure or something like that. So there's a lot of different solutions out there, but it's all driven on a lot of what are the business requirements, what are the applications, what are their recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives. So there's a lot of things we need to talk about with the customer to determine what that should be. But you guys, those opportunities are all out there. Every time you sell something new to a customer, ask them those two questions. And that'll open the door to making sure that they're covered, and that should all be part of their overall governance.
Quick add-on to that. When we're talking about business continuity, it's more than just a DRaaS plan, right? Backing up is great. Secondary site is great. But 2 years ago, we figured out we can't go to the office. What are we going to do, right? VPN concentrators, so everyone can get in. Do we have Zoom meetings, right? So business continuity is more than just, is my application going to remain up? It's what happens if my office is no longer accessible, right? So that's another opportunity because you guys have, a myriad of vendors to choose from to help solve those, right? Again, not my specialty, but again, always trying to make sure you guys can get, like Carlos does, get deep, wide with your product set.
Awesome, thank you. This is for Colin. What are the benefits of adding edge computing elements to a hybrid cloud?
So, ultimately, we from a DRT perspective, edge is the primary access point for the most part in terms of gaining the value oftentimes you derive either in terms of access to the cloud or access to within colocation. So, from our chair, we published the Data Gravity Index about a year and a half ago, which effectively said the major megatrend that's going on in the marketplace right now is data is growing at an exponential level, to the degree that it's actually inhibiting businesses because that data is aggregating amongst itself. So what data does, it begets data. And so the Data Gravity Index suggests that data gets stuck and organizations don't know exactly how to deal with that. So the way they solution it ultimately is sort of the question you had before, which is they're going to portion some of that in the public cloud and some of that privately. And that access point within Edge is oftentimes the best point to figure out what exactly I need to consume, because that's most of the time where consumption happens is on the edge. And so from a use case perspective, getting back to what I said before, really understanding what our clients are trying to achieve is vital here, because we know, I mentioned before, the limitations sometimes you have within infrastructure is if you have a particular chatty application, that can drive some issues associated with cost, because I'm going back and forth, ingress, egress. That can cause some challenges as it relates to performance overall. So really understanding how that edge fits into the equation. You're also seeing a migration of that edge away from purely a network element, which is an interconnection, to more of a data hub in its so more and more edge compute, because we're trying to get application utilization as close as you can to the end users. So we really believe that issue of how you solve the data challenge is at the forefront of what all you guys are going to have to deal with ultimately, because of the effectiveness of the organization is how do I consume that data effectively? How do I utilize it to the best degree? That's why you're seeing more and more. I talked to Tony a lot yesterday about an instance where he was driving, I think, 30, 40 kW per rack. That's probably an HPC cluster that folks are trying to get as much information out of that environment as possible. So understand the architecture, how that fits, how Edge plays in that is absolutely vital to understanding where your clients are wanting to go.
Thanks. Follow-up question. Wellington, do you think Edge is additive, or do you think it's in place of Colo? Like you're just moving the workloads to the edge and take them away from the central data center?
I think there's a whole lot of talk about what edge is, but not a whole lot of agreement what edge is, because the edge is defined by the end user, not by the service provider. And to that point, we have seen lots of use cases migrating to the edge and requiring processing at the edge. And again, there is still the processing element at the edge requires an ecosystem at that edge perimeter as well. So gravity requires density, and density is all about the number of players you have across all the locations. And I truly believe that data requires processing, and processing will require that interconnection to exchange the data easily with other providers as well.
Edge is defined by the customer. I like that. That's good. Okay, edge computing augments and expands the possibility of today's primarily centralized hyperscale cloud model and supports this systemic evolution and deployment of the IoT and entirely new application types, enabling next generation digital business applications. So more questions along those lines. The next one I think I'm going to ask Vicki in terms of professional services. How can professional services help my customers accelerate different projects, whether at the edge or not, to help me grow my recurring book of business?
Yeah, so here's the great thing about professional services is when you sell professional services and we put a statement of work together for the customer to solve specific problems, we're putting people, well, like what you do, right? You're IT strategists, you're in there working with your customers as consultants. We've got consultants on the ground now solving problems, but they're also digging up other opportunities. And what we found over many years is that if we start with a professional services engagement, the managed deal that comes behind it is up to 3 times the size of what it would have been without professional services. So professional services helps, I've talked a little bit about what we do today. It's assessing their current environment, it's understanding where they're trying to go and putting that migration plan in place. And architecting where they should, I guess we architect it and then we migrate them over. So professional services are vital, and they can be anything from just 2 weeks going in and helping them do a quick look, to last year, at the end of the year, we did a multi-million-dollar deal with the Bridgepoint account to help that customer who is very, I'm not going to say who it is, but they were very much in the news at the time, and we were able to help them go and determine how to migrate them off the platform they were on to get them on a platform that would run their environment more securely, faster, and meet some of those requirements they needed to do.
Excellent. Yeah, that was a huge sale. And again, because of the complexity of all these networks, sometimes you have to, augment with professional services. So we're going to open it up for some questions now. Anybody has any questions? We have some time.
First off, thank you so much. Very informative. We appreciate the partnership, and thank you for being here. I have one question, two people. So, Vicki, who's your top channel partner in the country?
Starts with a B, ends with an E.
Nice.
Bridgepoint?
Okay.
Yes, thank you, guys. Thank you.
And Colin, I have the same question for you.
Could I answer it differently than what Vicky said? I don't think so. So I think there's only one 3-time Partner of the Year, and that's Bridgepoint. So
Nice.
All right, those are layup questions, Miller. So I have a little bit of a different kind of question. So, I live in Northern California. We had rolling blackouts last week, every couple hours, well over 100 degrees. They made a green energy statement that in 10 years they're going to sell nothing but electric cars in California. And then they told people not to charge their cars last week, okay, right? So, when I look at the data center landscape where I live, there's, one of the largest data centers in South San Jose. They're not represented on stage, or they are on stage today, sorry. One of the largest ones in South San Jose. There's 30 or 40 in Santa Clara because it's on, Silicon Valley Power. Those data centers are 10 to 40 to 50 megawatts in size. 10,000 megawatts supports 12,000 households. Curious on your perspective on, the amount of power that is consumed at the data center versus households that are getting, shut down from blackouts, and what may be the things you guys are trying to do to offset the power draw at the data center. And I get it. We're on the other end of this crap consuming the application. So I understand that you're just serving what we're asking for. I get it, right? My kid's on PlayStation, or my daughter's on Netflix, or whatever we're doing. But what are you guys doing from an energy perspective to kind of draw less energy from the grid so that, households aren't impacted by rolling blackouts as we talk about climate change and all those other things coming?
Yeah, so that question is being asked in every metro in the world right now. Because if you look at what's happening, you mentioned the utility costs in EMEA. Look at the utility costs in every single major metro in EMEA. Look at the moratorium that's been put on in virtually every single metro that's in EMEA. Look what's going on in Northern Virginia right now. Probably you guys are up to speed on what's going on in Dominion Power. So it is a challenge that we're all trying to sort through to how to be good stewards of kind of the world, but also be able to support the rapid utilization of data that I mentioned, which is real. So we've taken on a significant sustainability orientation to how we're taking our company, and that's actually a Bill Stein, our CEO, led initiative. That's a big part of that. But the dynamic of actually how you navigate through the local requirements and then the consumption of the data center, it's one of the reasons that, frankly, we're pouring a ton of time into the community, because if you look at the major markets, I'll give you an example like Dublin. Dublin's the example. Dublin, we had a power bill literally double month over month on utility grid. They shut down grid access to the data center providers to a large degree because of that public policy issue that you're talking about. So I don't know that we've had a community alignment exactly about how data centers are going to work effectively. One of the things we talked about last night, though, was at our table was if there's an effectiveness quotient that we can move to as an industry, which says how can we be more efficient? We're driving more and more towards PUE in virtually a low PUE in virtually every single one of our data centers. That's at least part of the equation to try to manage it. Sustainability is another. But overall, I would say that challenge is going to be worked out in a significant, in a public way, I think, over the next several years because I'm in the Bay Area like you, and I don't want my power shut off again. But I want to also be part of the community that helps solve it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened, and anyone else could love to hear the answer, right? Verizon actually ran their generators, right? So every one of your facilities has generators, right? It's good to run them. It's good, get cycle through the gas, make sure they operate. So just curious, like I look at that as like a pretty good solution. Say, hey, we're going to proactively run the generators.
The question though is that sustainable?
Well, it's sustainable for 4 hours.
No. What I mean by that
Hopefully.
is from an environmental perspective. What we're trying to navigate through is one perspective is that saves on the utility side, but from an overall sustainability, from a globe perspective, does that actually add or take away, right? So there's this because the example would be I'll give you guys real quick. Sorry if I monopolize. A year and a half ago, the utility grid in Texas, Dallas went down to I think 5 degrees was the temperature for an extended period of time. Literally shut the grid down. I mean, that's what happened. They're talking about a rolling blackout. It was a complete blackout in a market that is unregulated. So if you weren't hedged in that marketplace, I mean, your utility bill went through the roof, right? So there's all these dynamics of how you deal with a climate-oriented responsibility, fulfilling demands, and also doing it from a financial perspective, manageable. It's a truly difficult dynamic to work through.
Thank you, Colin, for answering that. We have another question in the back. Saad, go ahead.
Thanks, Mal. You guys talked about hybrid cloud and even multi-cloud. It is conceivable from my perspective, I think from all of our engineering resources perspective, that a single customer solution will incorporate multiple ones of you or all of you. Geography, disaster recovery, so on and so forth. Are you guys putting some thought of making it easier for us to sell a hybrid solution without having to worry about, hey, Rackspace wants to sell all of it, Equinix wants to do it, a design that a single solution may incorporate something from each and every one of you? How is making it easier selling hybrid cloud for all of us, engineering side, agent side? Can you address or kind of give us some ideas on how we can sell with all of you on a single, not it would be 4 deals, but a single solution?
I can go first. Our foundation is based on neutrality. And since when we were found to networks can peer and exchange data on their backbones, we also let our customers to be neutral as well. So it's exactly to the point where the customers have to define where I'm going to place my workloads. And sometimes the customer doesn't want to have multiple points of contacts. They want to have one single point of contact, or they want to have one single provider. But sometimes that's not enough because we are now in all markets. They are not in all of the markets the customer may need. Of course, they have to deal with some local providers. So it's kind of a bothersome during the drawing and during the project. But at Equinix, we have our experts, and we have one session that we call digital strategy briefing, that we sit together with the customer experts, and we try to design the art of possible with the customers to see where that workload will be placed in a better position. Would it be in a colocation? Would it be in our colocation or in your on-prem facility sometimes? So we sit together with the customers to really understand the workload placement and work with your customers. So I have lots of stories that I can share about customers deploying multiple providers, but it's easy to tell a story that I experienced. But now I want to challenge all of you to build stories with us so we can tell stories together.
And I would say Rackspace, we partner with both Digital and Equinix. So we don't have our own data centers, so our solutions go into their facilities and utilize some of their products that we can help manage. And as far as some of these dedicated solutions, if they're an INAP customer, we can put it and work with INAP as well and put it into their facilities. So we're kind of co-location agnostic.
Great point.
But
No, it's a great
have
point.
very clear partnerships.
And I would also say the IT strategist has to be the single point of contact and play that role, because that's what he's got to do. But one more. Kevin's got a question real quick. If we can make it quick, it's the last question. Yep.
Hey, guys, are there any hot verticals right now that you're seeing common? More healthcare customers knocking on your door to finance? What are the hot verticals right now?
I'm seeing healthcare and retail.
I'm seeing crypto validators, stakeholders, not miners. What's with the stakeholders, validators? It's really hot right now.
Financial services.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Colin, Vicky, Wellington, Jeff, thank you guys so much. That's all we have time for, guys. Thank you.